Welcome everybody. This is Conversations with the Chamber. For those that I may not know or may not know me, I am Tony Felker, President and CEO of the Frisco Chamber of Commerce. And we are doing Conversations with the Chamber as a takeoff what was originally Conversations at the Chamber, but obviously circumstances have changed such that we are doing Conversations with the Chamber, items in particular impacting or being impacted by COVID-19 and how we get our business community back up and onto the road to recovery. So welcome everybody. Today, our topic is unintended consequences, particularly about HR type related areas. And we're going to get to our panelists in just a second. But before that, I wanted to give Chris Lee, our Governmental Affairs Manager, an opportunity to give us a little bit of an update. Is there anything going on from a legislative perspective, Chris, or, kind of give us a quick update as to crazy world of what's happening out there?
Yeah, so as you probably know, it's been really quiet. No, I'm kidding. We've got a lot going on. From the governor's announcement on Tuesday of this week, it's all a blur. We've got some new openings this week, including barbershops, hair salons, nail salons, tanning salons, and swimming pools. So those are all able to be open following certain CDC guidelines at 25% occupancy. That's the one sentence version of what's going on there. If you want more information, we've got some on our website. The city has some more information on their website. We have an advocacy update going out with all the information today as well. So if you're a member of the chamber and you subscribe to our advocacy update, if you're not subscribed, please do. We send out approximately weekly updates with information regarding government affairs things. On the federal level, we have the conversation around a fourth package of relief coming through. I think there's going to be a lot of political roadblocks to get that passed, so we might be talking about that one for a while, but I just want to put that plug out there. The conversation has started for the fourth package. It could include individual checks to all of us again, just like we got our individual stimulus checks just a little while ago. Could be a second check, could have a lot of funding for cities and counties as well. There's a lot of unknowns, but that conversation is happening. As far as government affairs, that's kind of what we're focused on right now. There's some questions that we've got going on here and there regarding just other unintended consequences, not HR related. But aside from that, the last plug I just want to throw out there is we have our Advocacy Action Center. So if you go to our website, you can fill out a form that it takes about 2 minutes to fill out. It's 2 clicks and you can submit letters to congressional representatives in your area. Right now we have one that would support 501c6 organizations like the Chamber. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you have any interest in doing that, please visit our website at the Advocacy Action Center. It's on our main page.
Hey, Chris, before I let you go, 2 very quick questions. You said, since you've already received your check, so people are getting their checks then, correct? Because I hear a lot of people still asking about that. And then the second question, when might phase 4 come around? Do you have any sort of an idea on what kind of timing we might be looking at there?
Correct. So the checks are coming out. My personal check hasn't actually mailed yet. It's supposed to mail today. So hopefully I'll see that at some point. I believe I saw a statistic that 80% of the first round of checks have been sent out. There were a lot of stumbling blocks getting those delivered and out to the correct individuals. I know they were trying to build the airplane as they were flying it on that one. So it's in the works. The second part of your second question, as far as when we could possibly see a phase 4, maybe a month, maybe a week, maybe 2 months. There's so much political unknown right now coming from kind of a partisan divide that I couldn't give you an accurate date on that one right now.
Conversations that I've been having through the U.S. Chamber, they think the earliest would be Memorial Day and probably a week or 2 after that. So we will stay tuned, and there'll be, as you said, a lot of political maneuvering to get to that point. So thank you, Chris. And we'll continue to maintain and take a look at the Q&A, so we're going to keep him involved. As we get into our panelists now, HR and unintended consequences, the first lesson I'll have for everybody is to understand what your role is and your proper role, or as somebody very wise once said, stay in your lane. My lane is not HR, and so I'm going to make certain to turn it over to our Senior VP, Tami Alexander, and she's going to kind of moderate and keep our panelists in line as we go forward. So Tami, I'm going to take it to you. I'm going to put myself on mute for right now and let you go away and introduce our panelists. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So this morning we have Karen Cunningham, who is a human resources consultant, and we have Sarah Recker, who is Director of Human Resources at, and I probably said your title wrong, sorry, at the National Breast Cancer Foundation. So thank you both for being here. And we just really want to have a little bit of a conversation about what everyone is going to be able to expect when they do start getting back into the office. So first question for Karen, or both of you if you both want to answer, but what are some of the unexpected turnover costs when employees return to work? That's one of the questions I've received a lot.
Well, so first of all, thank you for having me today. Some of the costs that are, obviously always traditional turnover costs, training, recruitment, things of that nature. One of the challenges we have right now is that the number of people in the job market is actually going to make the recruiting costs even higher, because you're going to be getting through a lot more candidates. People are going to be applying for everything. You're going to get a lot more individuals applying for positions who may not be the right fit, or it might not be the right opportunity for them, but they're just putting as many resumes out there right now because the unemployment rate is just so tremendously high right now. But one of the factors I think is most important to consider and measure as a business owner, as a manager, as a leader, is the cost of morale on turnover. And right now, no one's going to leave their job. You pretty much have to be beyond crazy to leave a position voluntarily right now, unless you have another opportunity that's knocking on the door. But just to leave a job, people just aren't going to be doing it right now. But they're watching what we're doing as leaders. They're watching the decisions that we make regarding their health, regarding their safety, regarding how we treat employees, how considerate or understanding that we're being as we go through this process. People are scared. And people, whatever their perception is their reality of where they are right now, or where we are as a country, as a world. And so I think we have to be very, very considerate of the fact that employees may stay right now, but you might lose your good ones and not your bad ones. And that's usually the case, by the way. If things aren't handled the right way by leadership as we go through this, this reopening process.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next question, because Sarah, I know that you're working on a return to office plan. And if you can give us some highlights of what should that include. And I mean, first of all, kudos to you for coming up with that, because when you said you were doing that, I'm like, that's amazing. And that's actually something most people might not have thought about. So
yeah, and a lot of my friends and peers in the HR community have all been working on that recently and collaborating together and sharing ideas. There's a lot of great resources out there through Dallas HR, legal help, all of that. But thanks for having me here. I love NBCF's partnership with the Chamber, but we're going to be opening our office soonish. We're not quite sure. We're looking at what that looks like. But we've been fortunate to be able to retain all of our staff since we run so lean, which is great for everyone. And we've just pivoted to Karen's point, like spending a lot of time, high communication, focused on morale. For us to go back to the office, some of the primary considerations that we're looking at is obviously safety, but also even just making sure our employees feel comfortable. So we're not going to bring everybody back all at once. We're not going to bring everybody back just for bringing them back's sake. Right now, we're all remote, and that's working. So we're going to hold on to that for a little while, I think. Another thing to consider, if you bring people back to the office, I would highly encourage looking at the laws and the requirements for that. OSHA is the big one right now, I think. You have to promise your employees a safe work environment. So in order to do that, what we're doing is we're looking at the CDC guidelines and also the governor's plan to reopen. So those are the two primary things. If you're following the requirements there, then you're probably okay. But I would, again, just generally, I would strongly encourage high communication, compassion, just understanding where people are at. There's childcare needs going on. There's just so much up in the air right now. I'm a big fan of the staggered return to the office. Don't bring everybody back at once, I don't think.
That's excellent. Thank you.
And that's and Sarah, the other point with, you mentioned the staggered, that's been a lot of questions that have come up in the HR community, is how to properly stagger. Mm-hmm. And there was a very innocent question that someone asked within an HR forum about, well, should we let all the older workers stay at home and bring the younger workers back in first? And while that may sound considerate, it also could be highly discriminatory. So, looking at that from just a holistic standpoint, maybe the best approach is actually to ask your employees which one of you are comfortable coming back to work. Do you have concerns? And it doesn't need to be disclosing health concerns, because, by the way, that's protected information. We don't want to have to go there. But if an employee shares it, that's fine. We just don't need to share it with anybody else. But, letting people basically, decide for themselves when the right time is for them. You're going to have a wave of people who right now are ready to come back in the office. They, in some of the scenarios I've heard, younger professionals, single, living in an apartment by themselves, they're going stir crazy right now, not having an outlet. There's lots of scenarios, two people, a working couple with young kids. Well, maybe one parent has the kids under control, but the other one needs to be able to focus and, let them get back into the office. And so, letting those employees be part of that process, first of all, again, shows a lot of respect and consideration for the employee, but it also protects you from making inadvertent or, unconscious, decisions about employees that can end up, being considered discriminatory and end up getting you into a lawsuit down the road. You certainly don't want that.
Yeah, I completely agree, Karen. I found that a lot of our employees, just like you were describing, said they're the ones raising their hands saying, when can we go back? And we've got others saying, ooh, I'm not so sure we're ready to go back. And so letting them kind of self-elect, but really leaning into not age, not, protected classes essentially, but leaning into business need and willingness, quite frankly. One thing we have, you mentioned symptoms. One thing we hope to do is, if you just putting it out there, building a document that's laying out expectations. And we're hoping to do that this week, where we say, this is what we're doing for y'all to keep you safe and healthy. And this is what we need you to do. And just clarifying those expectations in writing and just being high communication on that as people start to come back to the office. And one of those things will include, if you've experienced symptoms or if you've been exposed to someone who's experienced symptoms, we ask that you not come in. Whether they disclose that to us or not is up to them, but that's going to be an expectation we have.
That's great.
Okay, so if employees were laid off, and I know, Sarah, this doesn't apply to you. So Karen, if a company had to furlough or lay off employees and they're ready to reopen, do they have to go to those employees first? Or can they just put it out there for anybody?
First of all, well, two different scenarios. So if they're furloughed, they're still an employee. So they should be considered to come back right away. And hopefully if they're furloughed, you also have considered keeping on their benefits and things of that nature. And so that would be a different scenario. But if you laid off employees, and let's say you called it a permanent layoff because you didn't know how long it was going to last in duration, which is what several of my clients did, you don't have to hire back the employees who were laid off. However, I would be cautious about the reasons for those decisions. This isn't, in my humble opinion, the opportunity to clean house. It's a difficult time. And I think that, again, the morale issue for the people who are still employed are going to be watching and seeing what your moves are. You also may decide you don't want to rehire someone because they weren't as good of a fit for the position, but that person also happens to be, fall into a protected class, which, and then you end up hiring someone that isn't in a protected class to fill that position. Then the person that you didn't rehire now potentially has a claim that they can go and make. Doesn't mean that it's true. They just have a claim that they can make that states that, that you made that decision because of their protected class. Much more difficult for you to prove that you didn't make the decision that way because you never documented any concerns about this employee. Like I said, it's just not a great time to clean house. That said, if you've got someone who, it has been just a tremendous cancer to the organization, just if it's the decision that you believe is the right one to make, just make it carefully. Make it with an employment lawyer standing by your side, going through that process, because You just have to know what your risks are on the other end of that decision.
Okay, so I have a young staff, and by young I mean that that they all have elementary age children or children in childcare, and that I need some of these people to come back to work, but they need to stay home and homeschool, or they need to stay home with their children. What can I do? I mean, honestly, what can I do?
I think first and foremost, you just continue to look for opportunities to let them telework, work remote. If that's working now, then keep doing that. If it's a true case where you need somebody in the office, I would look at how can you shift your workloads around, and just look at organizational development planning and see who can transition and cover each other. I mentioned NBCF is just such a close-knit team that we do a lot of that already with business continuity and backups and a lot of process documents. And so we're able to do that and shift things around pretty easily. Look for alternative work and just see what that looks like. That would be your first choice, I think. Karen, following that, what do you think?
I really think that's, just look at every alternative. Take everything as an opportunity to go through an open dialogue and look at the possibilities. This is one thing we've learned through this process is creativity wins. We've become much more creative as a society, and so I think in the workplace, we're going to continue to have to find creative solutions there too. And so this is just going to be another opportunity to go through those exercises and listen and learn from organizations around us. Conversations like this, conversations like Chamber Works, the industry conversations that the Chamber is doing for the Chamber Works now that are more very industry aligned, industry focused. These are all ways for like businesses to be able to compare notes, figure out how they're dealing with that type of situation. And you might find that someone's come up with this brilliant idea, and I can tell you I'm not a creative person by nature, and so I have thrived off of listening and reading and learning from what others are doing. It's not, it's just not my brain the way that's wired.
And I would say too, especially when you're talking about, the family's needs, think about, like we've mentioned, employee morale and just leading with compassion in those conversations. Because if that's a need they have, there may be a business need as well, but looking for opportunities, Karen, to your point, that's creative, that kind of blends both of those. Everybody's in this boat right now, I feel like, right? We're all in this together. And so to find ways to accommodate those family needs, maybe, different parents have different needs. School's coming to an end, thank the Lord. So summer will potentially provide some relief, but I just feel that you'll be able to meet those needs with compassion. But if you ultimately need to, there's lots of options. You can look at PTO use, you can look at unpaid leave. There's some legislation out there as well with other options.
Hey, Tami,
So,
can I
another
jump in
thing too
real
that I want, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to
What
jump in
time?
real quickly because we had an industry roundtable yesterday that this came up, and then listening to you, I find it a little bit ironic that in this time of, air quotes again, social distancing, physical distancing, that everybody keeps talking about communication and over communicating, whether it's with customers, clients, employees, staff. I just keep hearing, and I kind of find it ironic. It's over communicate, over communicate. And I just wanted to throw in that comment real quickly and mess up the entire flow there and just kind of put that in there. So thanks, guys.
Okay, so to the other point though, so let's say we have, even though we're an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday office, and yes, we're staggering, but we really need everybody to come in at some point. Can we expand our hours and then require someone to come in later at night or on the weekend to fill the need? Or is that we can do or we cannot do?
I always start with it depends. Because it depends. It depends on the situation. Again, if every individual's different, and there could be a very valid reason why someone feels that they can't physically come into the office for their own personal health reasons or for the health reasons of their family. And so it just might not be possible for everyone. But I think, again, the more that we stagger things, space things out, create various shifts, different work days, maybe half work from home Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the other half work from home Tuesday, Thursday, whatever. That's not even, but anyway, but however it could be done. But, one other point I wanted to make about whenever we're talking about making arrangements and things like that, oftentimes I find that employers, company owners, business owners are trying to bear the burden of figuring out the right thing to do for an employee without asking the employee. It's a very, very nice, noble thing to do, but it's way easier if you just ask the employee. And there's nothing wrong with being courteous. If it comes from the right place, if it comes from heart, you don't start the conversation with, I know you have a health condition, so that's not the way to come at it. But if you say, I want to speak with you as an employee, I want to be respectful of all of our employees. Is there a way that we can do this that makes you feel more comfortable? And it doesn't mean that the business owner, the manager has to do everything that's suggested. And there may be business reasons why those things can't be done. And again, that's okay too. And that's easy to explain. And it doesn't mean that the ownership of that decision now belongs to someone else. It just means that we're just going through this continuous interactive process with employees, just trying to make sure that we're making the right decisions based on real information, not information that we think exists, which happens way more often than I could tell you should.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. Tony, to your point, communication is so important right now. So if you open the communication line with your employees, you'll be surprised at what you find out and what you could potentially work together on. We've seen such a amazing amount of communication from our leadership team, and that's been just awesome to see them be so transparent and communicative with our staff. And it's so helpful. So I would really encourage that. As you open that dialogue though, you'll find the benefit in that is coming down the line is going to be continual new information as things come up. We don't know what the future holds with all of this. We don't know what the summer or even the fall and winter will look like. So if you're building those communication pathways now, you'll benefit from that in the future, because even though you might start bringing people back to work, you may shut down again. So just being adaptable and creative, because things are going to continue to change. That's one of the biggest things I'm identifying is as we talk about bringing our employees back into the office and what that looks like. First, we sent everyone home, and there was a huge change management period where we were just communicating, comforting, talking through things, answering concerns, addressing so many questions. But now as we bring them back, we're in change management mode again because it's another big change. But I think that's the point is we're going to continue to be creatively adapting to all of these changes as they come.
Excellent. Okay, I have another question, but I want to tell any of our viewers, if you have a question, you can submit them through the Q&A, and we will ask those as soon as we receive those. So, all right, so I am walking into the office the first time I'm an employee. What am I fearing? I mean, and I know you can't predict that, but what are you expecting them to be afraid of?
Am I going to get sick by touching an elevator button? Honestly, that's the biggest one I'm hearing. And so that's where I'm saying, let's be communicative about what as an employer are we doing to mitigate that? So my return to office plan includes even the office park where we have our offices. What is that group doing? What are we doing in our office? What is the janitorial team doing? And that's where I'm trying to reassure that concern and say, this is what we're doing to prevent you from potentially getting sick. Social distancing, cleaning and disinfecting, those are the two primary areas of our return to office plan. How to social distance and how we've been cleaning and disinfecting. And so that's the biggest concern I've heard. But I know there's lots of others, job loss potentially, you know, all of that. We haven't experienced that again, but yeah.
Yeah, and you know, how their coworkers are going to react. That's the other fear is, okay, I'm coming back to the office. I plan to be responsible, but are my coworkers, are they going to have the same respect for me that I'm going to have for them? Are they going to make a joke out of this? And I think that's something, by the way, that I think we need to be prepared for as well is if you have an employee who, you know, the NBA player who went and rubbed everybody's microphones, and, you know, I mean, I'm shocked I can't remember his name right now, but because he'll be famous forever. But you know, it's just an idiot move. But people can be stupid sometimes. I mean, that's just a reality. I mean, and in the workplace, people get very, very comfortable with one another. And so that level of comfort sometimes results in inappropriate behavior. And what someone may think is funny, someone else may think is tremendously you know, dangerous to them from a health perspective and safety perspective. And so knowing how to deal with those types of issues as well, and to make sure that employees know that that type of behavior it's not going to be tolerated, I think is very, very important as well. Setting a very firm tone for, you know, a respectful workplace and what that looks like.
So if I come in and my assumption is that they're going to have a team of people in hazmats cleaning the office all the time, and that doesn't happen, what, I mean, is that an expectation that they should have? Should employers, what is the employer's full responsibility? I mean, to that degree, or is it they take Clorox wipes and they wipe down handles and things? I mean, what is their requirement?
My understanding is that, you know, from an OSHA standpoint, our requirement as employers is to provide a safe work environment from known hazards, right? And since the CDC has declared COVID a known hazard, that's something that we have to address, right? It would be super irresponsible to not. Does that mean that we need to all be wearing hazmat suits when we go back to work? Probably not. Let's use common sense and good judgment and make wise decisions. That's where I love like leaning into facts and not like Facebook hype, right? So part of our return to office plan includes a whole section where I've detailed out for everyone just facts from the CDC website with links so that they know this is what is true. This is how long it lives on a surface. This is what you can do to prevent spread, right? And so I think leaning into the truth is going to be really helpful in setting expectations with employees.
And Sarah, you mentioned the CDC and their materials. I have actually downloaded several of their workplace posters that they've created for COVID-19 and sent them to clients, because it's everything from posters you can put in your bathroom to remind them about, you know, proper hand washing, to posters that can go in your front doors that remind you about protocol, informational posters that you can email out to your employees or put in the break room or what have you, that explain information about the symptoms of COVID-19, how to protect yourself. I mean, lots and lots of tools. I can't even tell you how many posters they have for the workplace specifically to COVID-19, but they're great. And I would recommend everyone go out to the Center for Disease Control website and find those workplace posters. Find the ones that look like they would be right for your work environment, but they're a great tool. And that's another way to demonstrate that you are doing everything you can to comply. We cannot guarantee that someone isn't going to contract COVID-19 by walking into a workplace. We can't guarantee that won't happen at the grocery store. We can't guarantee it won't happen at the gas station. So, but we can at least do everything we can to provide information and resources. The other thing about cleaning, by the way, we've had a lot of conversations with people about the lack of cleaning supplies, especially for smaller businesses, because they don't have maybe an access to a contractor who is providing office supplies directly to them. You know, they've been shopping at the same retail stores that I'm shopping at that you haven't found hand sanitizer in 8 weeks. And so, you know, asking employees to bring supplies with them from home to help maintain their workspace and common workspaces as well would be good. And then also keeping in mind, just reminding employees not to go and pick up someone's pen off of their desk and use, you know, someone's pen. Don't use, you know, don't go into someone else's workstation. You know, Tony, I appreciate the pen, but I'm not going to use it. So he's got his, and, you know, it's got to remain his. Making sure from a common break room area that you're not sharing utensils, sharing coffee mugs, you know, things of that nature, where, you know, trying to be conservative in the past, you know, organizations maybe, you know, had gone to that. Well, it'd be nice if everybody brought their own cup now, or use disposable, to make sure that you're not sharing things in the office.
Okay, and my last question for y'all, and I would like both of y'all, is if, and especially like Sarah, you have the pink room, and that's a great place for people to gather. It's not a break room. It is just an easy room to walk into, and there's a group of people in there, and those people are not bothered all being in the same room together. They may or may not be 6 feet apart. They're having a conversation, they're doing their thing, and everybody in there is comfortable with that situation. But someone else in your office is not comfortable with that. How does that have to be handled? I mean, does that have to be broken up, or
Well, yeah.
or can that still happen?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, NBCF has a great space in our office where we have a lot of material on display, and we've been able to show all of our partnerships and a lot of stuff. So there's just a lot of pink in that room. It's really great. So we have been using that space for our entire company to gather at times. And Karen, I would say, to your point, everyone's return to office plan ultimately needs to match the needs of their employees in their space. And that's going to be different for everybody. So at NBCF, we have a tendency, our mission is relationship-based. Our organizational culture is relationship-based. So my biggest fear is if I bring my workforce back in, we're all going to hug and say we've missed each other so much, right? But that would not be in line with our return to office plan. So we've included something to prevent that. Oh, hi, puppy dog, cute. We've written into our plan that we're encouraging one person per room, and that's a little bit strict for us. Even if we come back to the office, we're still going to do virtual meetings. Even if we've got a few folks in the office, they'll be calling in from their own workspace to the same meeting rather than getting together in a meeting room. For people who have a shared workspace, we've encouraged that they just, if they're going to be in the office, if they want to, they can pick an empty conference room and make that their individual workspace for the time being. So Karen, I don't think that I would be able to walk into the pink room and find a group of people all chatting and not social distancing, because that wouldn't be in line with our plan. Other employers may be comfortable with that, but I wouldn't recommend it, because you want to be in compliance, I think, with CDC recommendations. So that's where our plan really leans into those facts. The biggest thing there is, even if I was okay with it, and even if those employees were okay with it, that's great. The problem is, you mentioned somebody else on staff may not be okay with it. And I want to provide a safe work environment where everyone feels comfortable. So even if someone else doesn't feel comfortable with it, then that's enough for me to say, let's not do that. Let's make sure that we respect everyone's needs at this time.
And I love that point too, Sarah, about just presenting facts and information. This really is an education opportunity. There's so much information out there, and there's so much misinformation out there at the same time. And so it's going to be very difficult to navigate that, I think, in the beginning, because people are going to have different ideas about what an appropriate way to handle things is, or what safe practices are. And there may be some times, by the way, that someone's idea of a safe practice is something that can't be done. Or that isn't even something that is recommended be done. Maybe it's too far. And so having that conversation, helping that person understand, not just telling them that's not what we're going to do. It's kind of like the manager, that gives an order but doesn't explain the why. People need to understand the why. They need to understand why decisions are made. They need to understand so that they can actually, appreciate, even if they don't agree with it, they can at least still understand how the decision was made or why it was made. And so, again, that communication, that dialogue is just going to be so very, very important.
Wonderful. Well, Tony, did you have any other questions? Those are all the questions I have.
I wanted, we'll see if Chris has got any questions first. I do have one or two, but I want to make certain that our audience, listening audience, viewing audience has a chance to get their questions in. Chris, what do you have out there?
Yeah, so we didn't have anything on the Q&A or the chat feature. I did have one question, though, about the unemployment checks and how employers are going about, if I'm getting paid more with an unemployment check, what's the kind of situation employers are finding themselves in, and how can you encourage employees to go back to work?
That is a great question, and you are so right. That is going to be a big problem. It really hasn't started happening yet, but I think in the next couple of weeks, we're going to start seeing the effects of that federal stipend for unemployment. So in the state of Texas, employees are eligible for unemployment if they meet certain criteria. Let's see, 66 2/3 of their weekly pay, up to $521 per week. So that's the $521 per week is the maximum in the state of Texas. Every state's different. But if you were laid off as a result of COVID-19, and that means anything related to COVID-19, if your business operations were impacted because of COVID-19 and you had to lay off, that makes you qualified not only for the state unemployment, but for that federal stipend as well of a flat $600. It's not a percentage of weekly up to $600. It is a flat amount. And so you may, there are workers out there who right now, as the federal stipend actually went into effect, they would be making more now than they did. They could be making more now than they did working in a job. And so, unfortunately, until that stimulus works out, it's just going to have to be a worker's decision. If an employee is offered a job and they choose not to accept that job or accept to come back to work, let's say it's a layoff situation and the employer says, hey, by the way, I'd like for everybody to come back to work on June 1st. And an employee says, you know what, I'm making more money staying home, I'm fine. There's nothing you as an employer have to do. However, the Texas Workforce Commission has said that you can report that to them and make them aware of that decision that employee made to not accept employment that was, offered to them. Now, they may still get unemployment, by the way, because that decision to not accept the job, to accept the return to work, may be because they are dealing with a childcare situation, or they're dealing with a health situation of themselves, or a family member related to COVID-19. There's no telling what the circumstances are. So ultimately, that's going to be the Texas Workforce Commission's decision. But if they make that decision, that you're just going to have to move on and decide as a company, if you want to go and hire someone else to fill that position instead, or, what you want to do. There's certainly no reason why you would need to hold that position open for that person just because, they want to stay home for an extra month, for whatever reason. But that is going to be a real issue. Now, that federal stipend, it's going to run out at some point. And whenever it does, for these workers who are choosing not to, if they choose not to accept a position during that time because they're enjoying staying home with the extra government check, they just need to keep in mind that at the point that they want to re-enter the workplace, they're going to be dealing with a 20 to 30% unemployment rate out there. So the number of people looking for jobs is going to be even higher. So good luck in finding a job at that point whenever you're not making that extra flat $600 a week. So my personal opinion and my personal recommendation would be, if you're offered a job, I would take the job. It's the right, it's the right course for you long term, and I wouldn't look at a federal stipend check as being your long term ride to, sitting at home and floating on the water all summer.
That could be a very expensive rolling of the dice right there to check and see what's going on. Yes, it could.
There's a long term effect.
Yeah, Chris alluded a little bit to the political maneuvering that's going to be going on with Phase 4. I know one aspect that's included in that, depending on which side of the aisle you're on and all that, is liability. And I think I just may have gotten off. Hopefully you guys can still hear me.
We can.
Very good. The question of liability on employers, how does that work? And at what point in time do you follow enough of the guidelines that liability is no longer a question there? Sarah, and then we can throw it over to Karen too.
Yeah, I think honestly, are you talking specifically about safety and return to the office with liability?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
As long as you can prove that that's why I'm really leaning into those CDC facts and the governor's recommendations to reopen the state. If those are things that, people in power essentially have said, this is these are the facts, this is what you should be doing. If you can prove that you're doing that, that's why I really love a return to office document, where you can say, I've promised as an employer, I'm going to provide this, this is what we're doing. This is, if you can outline that and document it and communicate it to your staff, you're going to be pretty well protected from anybody coming in and saying, hey, I got sick. Because honestly, you know, it's a virus, right? So there still may be people in your team that are going to contract it. And if that's the case, as long as you as an employer can show, like, this is what I've done to prevent that. I've been making reasonable decisions, using common sense, and following those recommendations.
Karen, any follow up there? As I tried to maneuver around Zoom and incoming calls, I still haven't figured out how to do that.
So, no, actually spot on with what Sarah said. You know, offense is the best defense. You know, just making sure that we're in control of that messaging, and we're, you know, that we're doing everything we can in a very proactive way to make sure that we're addressing those concerns. We can never prevent someone from bringing a claim. We can never prevent someone from going and contacting a lawyer and saying that something happened. But what we can do is make sure that we've done everything we can to demonstrate that we've done things the right way, or as much of the right way as we were capable of doing, and showing good faith always goes a very, very, very long way. And so if we're doing those things, then we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves and to protect our workers.
I would add too, if you're following those recommendations, those guidelines, if you are reopening your office as we reopen the state, so to speak, I would just encourage business owners and HR departments to really consider the fact that you may reopen, and then you may find that somebody who's been in your office, an employee, has disclosed that they've been diagnosed or tested positive. And so that's just something to have in the back of your mind. What is your plan, so to speak, in the event that that occurs? So start thinking ahead as you reopen your office, make that plan, communicate with your employees, but then also be aware that there may be other things that happen. That plan may change, right? I've written this return to office plan. I'm going to update it in a couple weeks because things will continue to evolve in the news and with the virus. And so again, you just have to be really adaptable and be ready for that plan to change and evolve.
And there may be unforeseen circumstances or unintended consequences. We've got a couple of minutes before we wrap up here. Chris, has anything else come in? Otherwise, I've got one last question and allow our panelists to have a closing thoughts.
The Q&A section is nice and quiet. So
Nice
if you
and
have anything
quiet.
else, that's all for you.
Well, I was just curious when you guys were talking about, you know, communicate, be very careful in how you're handling things, document. But doesn't this also put management in a tough position whereby, hey, things are still going on at work. You still have employees that may not be performing the way that you need them to be and not holding up to their job. This puts an awful lot of pressure on management. How do you deal with, if you do need to let somebody go during this time, that's a lot of extra pressure. And how do you deal with that in terms of, I'm assuming documentation is going to be part of what you're going to call for there, but can you address that question a little bit?
You know that we're both HR professionals, so we're always going to document it, right?
I hear that all the time for some reason, right across the way here. So
I would say, and Karen, you're going to probably be able to add a lot to this, but I would say business as usual a little bit. If you have something where somebody needs to be invited to leave the organization, you should have all of the same processes in place where you've documented, you have worked with them. Whether it's a performance issue, have you used a performance improvement plan? Have you provided training? Have you worked with them? Has there been a dialogue? Generally speaking, if you're doing it right and with compassion, there shouldn't be a lot of surprises. And then of course, if it's a behavior issue or something that goes wrong, a conduct issue, then, you know, some people use a 3 strikes rule, some people just pull the trigger. But again, as long as you're documenting what you're doing, COVID shouldn't have influenced that too much, I don't believe. Karen, what do you think?
I completely agree. The most difficult thing in a time like this is you really do have to compartmentalize the issues. You got to stick the COVID-19 issues over in the COVID-19 box and look at how you're dealing with those issues. But then if there's a performance issue, if there's an employee that's not doing what they need to do, they still have to be handled. It still has to be handled the same way as it would have been handled in January, or it would have been handled, you know, a year ago. It's not the right thing to do for the rest of your workforce to ignore a problem because there's another underlying issue going on. You know, it's going to, that right there and the effect of morale that's a morale killer in your organization. And at a time when things are very tense and very difficult, letting a bad problem continue to be a bad problem, you're not only dealing with that now, you're creating a precedent that is going to live with you. Okay, so you don't deal with it now. Now you've basically, demonstrated to that person that you're accepting their behavior, or you're accepting their conduct, and maybe you're just going to let it keep going on. So maybe we go out a year from now, then how do you deal with it? They haven't changed a bit. So what do you do then? It's still the same thing. So you deal with it now, you deal with it later, you're still going to have to deal with it, and dealing with it sooner is much, much, much better for everyone, including that employee. If they're not a good fit for you, they need to go find somewhere else. Give them an invitation to go find another employer.
Help them find their next opportunity. And I wish it was that easy, Karen, that we could just put COVID in a box and just seal it up. I wish it was that easy. But
I wish.
As we go ahead and close out here, I want to give all three of you, and first of all, before I forget, I want to thank the whole chamber team behind the scenes that are on camera. Everybody's doing their part and doing the job. We appreciate all three of you coming on and helping us through these tough cases, and appreciate what you guys are doing. And I think too often, you only tend to hear about HR. It's like the ref in the game. You only hear about the ref when he's not doing a good job. A lot of times you only hear about HR when there are problems, but we appreciate what you guys do every single day. But I want to let each of you kind of close out, including Tami, with just some closing thoughts, either a piece of advice or something, a particular story that you heard of that illustrate, or a piece of advice or something that you would have done differently if you could at this point in time. And we'll start it off with Karen, and then we'll go to Sarah, and then wrap it up with Tami.
All right. I guess one of the things that I just always go back to is decisions are difficult. Decisions are difficult to make as a leader. And so I always remind people that if so take a step back from it and look at how you're making the decisions and why you're making the decisions. And if the decisions are being made because you genuinely believe you're making the right decisions, for the good of the people, for the good of the workplace, if your heart's in the right place, then more times than not, it's going to lead you to the right decision. Now, you can make some innocent mistakes along the way, but I think if you just go into it feeling confident that the perspective that you're looking at it through, that lens that you're looking at it through, is one of caring and concern and compassion, then I think you're going to find yourself at the right answer more times than not.
Very good. Thank you, Karen. Ms. Sarah.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what you said, Karen. I was thinking of that. Leaders right now, I found we have fairly young workforce, and I found they're looking to our leadership team for information, right? Because they're not getting it other places, or they're not sure what's true, right? So if leadership can be communicative and share facts and provide that reassurance, I think that is a great starting point for your organization. And then following that, that gives you the opportunity, once you've built that trust, to be compassionate and have dialogue about what your people need and how you can care for them in this time. And oftentimes doing that is going to fuel what the business needs as well.
Very good. And then bringing it right back to home, Miss Tami.
Well, you can never over communicate, right? You just communicate. And one thing that I've been telling people is, just because we're back at work, we were worried about self-care when everybody was out of the office. You still have to be concerned about self-care when they come back, because it's probably going to rear its ugly head and come back with a vengeance, because there's the fear of coming back to work, and then the stress of not being at home to take care of those things. And those are just the two things that I may not be the greatest at, but I try really hard to focus on those two things, because I think if you can do those, overall, you should have a pretty happy team. And thank you, ladies, for coming on and giving us your time this morning. We appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks to all three of you, and thanks for everybody listening in. And Chris Lee with Conversations with the Chamber, as we put on these different webinars with different topics, all of which we're trying to do to help us get through this crisis and on the road to recovery as soon as possible. I would be remiss if I didn't let everybody know that the chamber actually is going to be closed today at 3 o'clock, because we're bringing in a cleaning crew to make certain everything is cleaned up and sanitized as we get ready to fully be open to the public and start having more and more people in here. So just put that in there. Thanks to everybody. Thank you guys for your great advice. Relationships, communication, my God, it just keeps coming back to those basic things. So thank you guys so much. Thanks to our viewers. let people know this will be out there. Yes, Chris.
One quick thing, we also need to mention that we have our next conversation with the Chamber coming up on Tuesday with Mayor Cheney, Chief Mark Pylan, and Ron Patterson with the EDC. It's a follow-up to a conversation we had earlier regarding the city and how we're kind of opening Frisco step by step along with the governor's orders.
Absolutely, and that'll be sponsored by the Frisco EDC, and we will have a lot of people. We had almost 200 people registered for that last time. There is no fee, but we do ask for registration, and obviously with everything reopening and different conditions and just how the community is reacting, will be great to visit with them and have all that. So that'll all be on Tuesday. And what time again, Chris? 10 o'clock?
10 a.m. And you can register on our website.
Very good. So with that, folks, you guys be careful, stay strong, be safe out there, and we'll catch you up the next time. Thank you, ladies.